Daniel Carter set down his glass so hard, the whiskey jumped over the rim and every head at the reunion table turned. For 15 years he had trained himself to make no noise, to take up no space, to want nothing out loud. Now a single sentence had cracked him open in front of 100 people he'd spent half a lifetime avoiding. Across the room, Claire Whitmore stood frozen, her hand pressed to her mouth, 4 words still hanging in the air between them. "Did you get my letter?" What letter? He never got a letter. And somewhere in that room a woman who'd guarded a secret for 15 years felt her stomach drop. Before we go further, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from tonight, so I can see how far this story has traveled. And if a quiet man finally hearing the truth is the kind of story that stays with you. Subscribe and follow along, because this one only gets heavier from here. Daniel Carter almost didn't go. The invitation had sat on his kitchen counter for 3 weeks, propped against the sugar jar, curling a little at the corner. Brookhaven High Class of 2010. 15-year reunion. He'd read it maybe 40 times. Each time he told himself the same thing. There's no reason to go. He said it out loud alone in his apartment, the way a man says things when there's no one left to talk to but himself. And every time he said it, some stubborn part of him refused to throw the card away. He was 33 years old. He adjusted insurance claims for a living, which meant he spent his days measuring other people's disasters, flooded basements, totaled sedans, kitchen fires, and assigning them a dollar value. He was good at it. He was calm on the phone when people were falling apart. He could look at the wreckage of somebody's whole life and stay steady, stay quiet, keep his voice low and even. "I understand this is difficult," he'd say. "We're going to get through it." He believed that when he said it to strangers. He just never quite believed it about himself. His daughter Emma was 7. She was asleep down the hall the night he finally picked up the phone and asked his neighbor Rosa if she could watch her Saturday evening. "Of course," Rosa said. "You going somewhere nice?" "A reunion," Daniel said. "High school." "Oh, that's wonderful. You'll see all your old friends." Daniel didn't correct her. He didn't tell her that he hadn't really had friends. That he'd been the kind of teenager who ate lunch fast so he could go sit in the library, that he'd learned early it was safer to be invisible than to be seen and found wanting. "Thank you, Rosa," was all he said. "I won't be late." He got Emma ready for bed himself that night, the way he did every night. Read her 2 chapters, answered her questions. "Daddy, why do you have to go to a party?" "It's not really a party, sweetheart. It's just people I went to school with a long time ago." "Were they nice to you?" Daniel paused. Emma had a way of asking the exact question he didn't want to answer. "Some of them," he said finally. "Go to sleep now." He turned off her light. He stood in the doorway a moment longer than he needed to, watching her breathe the way he had every night since her mother left. Then he went to his own room, and he lay down, and he stared at the ceiling, and he thought about a girl he hadn't let himself think about in 15 years. Deb. He got to the reunion 20 minutes late on purpose. He'd learned that trick a long time ago. Arrive when the room is already loud, already full, already committed to its own noise, and you can slip in along the edges without anyone marking the moment you came through the door. It was easier that way. No one turning to look. No one deciding in the half-second it takes to size a man up whether he mattered. The reunion was in the old gymnasium, dressed up with tablecloths and string lights and a banner that someone had clearly ordered online. The basketball hoops were still bolted to the walls. The whole place smelled like floor wax and warm catering trays, and underneath that, faintly like it always had, like sweat and rubber and the particular loneliness of being 16. Daniel found a spot near the wall, got himself a drink he didn't want, and did what he did best. He watched. He watched the men he'd known as boys. Heavier now, most of them softer in the jaw, laughing too loud at their own jokes the way men do when they're a little afraid of the silence. He watched the women, some of them still wearing their high school selves, like a favorite jacket, others transformed into strangers he'd never have recognized. A man named Greg Holloway clapped him on the shoulder. "Carter, Daniel Carter, holy cow. I didn't think you'd show." "Greg." Daniel shook his hand. Good to see you. What are you up to these days? You look, man, you look good. You look put together. What do you do? Insurance. Insurance solid. Steady money. You married? There it was. The question always came fast. No, Daniel said. Divorced. I've got a daughter. Oh. Greg's enthusiasm flickered the way people's did when they hit a soft spot they hadn't meant to. Well, kids are great. That's great, man. Yeah. There was a silence, and Greg filled it the way people always filled it, with a slap on the arm and a promise to catch up later that both of them knew he wouldn't keep, and then he was gone, swept back into the crowd, back into the noise. Daniel returned to the wall. He wasn't unhappy exactly. That was the thing people never understood about men like him. He wasn't sitting in the dark, stewing in misery. He'd made a life, a small, careful, load-bearing life. He had Emma. He had his job. He had his routines. Coffee at 6, the same drive to the office, the same grocery store on Thursdays, the same 3 shows he watched alone after his daughter went to sleep. It was a life you could live without anyone ever getting close enough to hurt you. He'd built it on purpose, brick by quiet brick, after the divorce. After a marriage that had gone the way a marriage goes when you enter it not out of love, but out of a bone-deep conviction that love is for other people, and this decent, agreeable woman who tolerates you is as much as a man like you is ever going to get. His ex-wife had said it to him once near the end, not even cruelly. Just tired. You're not really here, Daniel. You never were. It's like being married to somebody through a window. He hadn't argued. That was the worst part. He'd stood there and taken it because she was right, and both of them knew she was right, and there was nothing to say. So no. He wasn't miserable at the reunion. He was just doing what he'd taught himself to do a very long time ago. He was staying behind the glass. And then the glass shattered. She came in through the far doors, and Daniel knew her before his brain finished forming the thought. Claire. 15 years fell away in a single second. He was not 33 anymore. He was 18, standing at his locker with his heart trying to break out of his chest, watching Claire Whitmore walk down a hallway, like the whole building had been built just to give her somewhere to go. She was older now. Of course she was. There was silver starting at her temple that she hadn't tried to hide, and a fineness around her eyes that only comes from years. But it was her. The same way of holding her head. The same slight hesitation before she smiled, like she was deciding whether you'd earned it. Daniel's hand tightened around his glass. Don't, he told himself. Don't do this. You are a grown man. You have a daughter. You do not still. But he did. That was the humiliating, undeniable truth of it. 15 years, a marriage, a divorce, a whole other human being he'd created and raised, and one look at Claire Whitmore across a decorated gymnasium, and 18-year-old Daniel came roaring back up from wherever he'd been buried, wanting the exact same impossible thing. He turned away. He made himself turn away. He looked at the drink table, at the banner, at the old scoreboard, at anything. People like her don't stay in stories like yours, he reminded himself. They never did. You knew that at 18, and it's still true now. He decided he would leave. He'd finish the drink, make one lap, so it wouldn't look strange, and go home to his daughter and his quiet apartment and his 3 shows. He'd tell Rosa it was nice. He'd throw the invitation in the trash where it belonged. He set his glass down. Daniel. He froze. He knew the voice. He'd have known it in a crowd of 10,000 people. He turned around slowly, and Claire Whitmore was standing 3 feet away from him, close enough that he could see she was nervous, and that undid him more than anything else could have. Hi, she said. Claire. His voice came out steadier than he had any right to expect. Hi. I wasn't sure it was you. She gave a small, uncertain laugh. You look exactly the same. Isn't that awful? Everyone else looks like their own uncle, and you look exactly the same. You look... Daniel stopped. There were too many words, and none of them were safe. You look good, Claire. It's good to see you. Is it? She said. It was such a strange thing to say that he didn't know how to answer it. There was something underneath it, some weight he couldn't read, Yeah, he said carefully. It is. She nodded. She was holding her own drink with both hands like she needed something to do with them. I heard you stayed around here, she said. In Ohio. Columbus. Yeah. And someone said you have a little girl. Emma. She's 7. Something moved across Claire's face when he said it. He couldn't name it. It wasn't quite happiness, and it wasn't quite pain, but it was near both. That's wonderful, she said quietly. That's really wonderful, Daniel. What about you? He asked, because it was his turn. Because that was how these things went. Where'd you land? Chicago. I've been in Chicago the whole time. She said it like a confession. I do marketing. Consulting, sort of. It's fine. It's a good job. That's great, Claire. Is it? She said again, and this time she almost laughed at herself. God, listen to me. I keep saying that. Is it? I sound insane. You sound nervous, Daniel said, and he surprised himself by saying it because he never said the true thing. He always said the safe thing. But it came out anyway. You don't have to be nervous. It's just me. And Claire looked at him, then really looked at him the way she had once looked at him a lifetime ago in a stairwell, the way that had kept him awake for months, and her eyes filled up just slightly, just enough. That's the thing, Daniel, she said. It was never just you, not to me. Well, he didn't understand. That was the truth of the next several seconds. Daniel Carter stood in a gymnasium he'd been afraid of for 4 years of his life, and he did not understand what the woman in front of him was telling him. Claire, I'm sorry. She wiped quickly at her eye, embarrassed, and gave a little shake of her head. I promised myself I wasn't going to do this. I told my sister, I said I'll be normal, I'll be fine. I'll say hi and it'll be fine. And here I am. She laughed, wet and unsteady. 15 years, and you still... She stopped. Someone across the room laughed too loud. A song changed. The string lights hummed. I have to ask you something, Claire said. And it's going to sound strange, and I need you to tell me the truth. Okay? However embarrassing it is. Just the truth. Daniel's chest had gone tight. Okay. She took a breath. He watched her gather herself, watched 15 years press down on her shoulders, watched her decide to say a thing she'd clearly been carrying a very long time. After graduation, Claire said. That summer, before I left for Chicago. Yeah, did you get my letter? The words didn't make sense. He heard them each one, and they didn't assemble into anything. Your what? My letter, Claire said, and her voice cracked on it. I wrote you a letter, Daniel. That summer. I left it. I made sure it got to you. I gave it to somebody I trusted, and I waited. I waited the whole time before I moved. I waited for weeks, and you never... She stopped. Her hand had come up to her mouth. You never answered. You never said anything. And I told myself, okay, he read it, and he doesn't feel the same, and that's my answer. And I have to live with it. So I got on a plane, and I lived with it. For 15 years, Daniel, I lived with it. Daniel felt the floor tilt very slightly under him. Claire, he said. I don't what letter? She went still. I never got a letter, he said. I never got anything. Claire, I swear to you, I swear on my daughter, I never got any letter. The color drained out of her face. He watched it happen. He watched her lips part, and no sound come out. He watched the certainty she'd built her whole adult life on start to buckle in real time right there in front of him, under the string lights between the basketball hoops. That's not possible, she whispered. I'm telling you the truth. But she said, Claire's eyes had gone somewhere else now, somewhere years back, chasing something. She told me she gave it to you. She looked me in the face and she told me she watched you take it. Who did? Daniel asked. Who told you that? And Claire didn't answer, because at that exact moment across the crowded gymnasium, a woman stopped dead in the middle of a conversation, drink in hand, and looked over at the two of them standing against the wall and went white. Daniel followed Claire's stare. He recognized the woman. Older, sharper, elegant in a way Claire had never bothered to be. He'd seen her 100 times as a teenager, dropping Claire off, picking her up, watching him from behind a car window, with an expression he'd never been able to read. Claire's older sister, Mara. Mara Whitmore was looking at the two of them, the way a person looks at a door they thought they'd locked 15 years ago, and had just watched swing slowly open. "Claire," Daniel said quietly, "who did you give the letter to?" Claire didn't take her eyes off her sister. For a long, terrible moment, she didn't say anything at all. And when she finally spoke, her voice had gone strange and small and very young. The voice of a girl who had just felt the ground she'd stood on for half her life turn to water beneath her. "I gave it to Mara," Claire said. Across the room, her sister set her drink down and started walking toward them fast. And Daniel Carter, a man who had spent 15 years teaching himself to feel as little as possible, felt his heart begin to pound, like it was trying to make up for all the years it had gone quiet. Mara Whitmore crossed that gymnasium like a woman walking toward a firing squad she'd been dreading for 15 years, and by the time she reached them, her smile was already in place. That practiced, brittle smile Daniel remembered from car windows and doorways a lifetime ago. "Claire," she said. "Honey, there you are. I've been looking everywhere for you." "Mara." Claire's voice had gone flat and strange. "You remember Daniel?" "Of course I do." Mara turned that smile on him, and it never touched her eyes. "Daniel Carter. My goodness, look at you, all grown up." "Mara," Daniel said. He didn't say anything else. He'd learned a long time ago in his line of work that when you suspect somebody's lying, the worst thing you can do is fill the air. You go quiet. You let the silence sit there and get heavy, and you watch what the other person does to make it stop. Mara didn't like the silence. He could see it. She looked between the two of them, and her fingers tightened around the stem of her wine glass, and she said too brightly, "Well, isn't this something? The whole gang back together. Claire, sweetheart, they're about to do the class photo. We should really—" "Did you give Daniel my letter?" Claire said it quietly. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. The 4 words landed in the middle of the 3 of them, like a stone dropped into still water, and Daniel watched the ripples cross his old crush's sister's face. Mara's smile flickered. "What letter?" "Don't," Claire said. "Sweetheart, I don't know what." "Don't." Claire's voice cracked, and a couple standing nearby glanced over and then quickly looked away. 15 years ago, I gave you a letter, that summer, before Chicago. I handed it to you in the kitchen, and I asked you to make sure Daniel got it, because I was too scared to give it to him myself, and you took it, and 3 weeks later, you told me you looked me in the eye. Mara, you told me you gave it to him, and he read it, and he didn't want anything to do with me." Mara had gone very still. "And I believed you," Claire said. "I got on a plane and I flew 900 miles away, and I built an entire life around believing you. And now this man is standing here telling me he never got anything at all." For a moment, nobody moved. Daniel watched Mara's throat work. He watched her eyes dart to Claire, to him, to the crowd around them, calculating, always calculating, looking for the exit, the way she'd probably been looking for it for 15 years, without knowing when the door would finally close on her. "Claire," Mara said, and her voice had gone low and urgent. "This isn't the place. Okay, people are everyone's right here. Can we not do this in the middle of—" "Answer the question," Daniel said. He surprised himself. His voice came out level and cold, the voice he used on the phone when someone was trying to inflate a claim when he already knew the truth and just needed them to say it out loud. Mara looked at him like she'd forgotten he could speak. "Excuse me." "You heard her." Daniel didn't blink. "Did you give me that letter or not?" "I don't remember every piece of paper from 15—" "Yes, you do," Claire said, and there it was. 3 words quiet as anything, and they broke something open. Because Claire wasn't asking anymore. Daniel heard it, and Mara heard it too. The question had already been answered somewhere behind Mara's eyes, and now the only thing left was whether she'd have the decency to say it. "Yes, you do," Claire said again, and her voice was shaking now. "You remember every piece of paper. You remember everything, Mara. You've never forgotten a single thing in your whole life. You remembered my dentist appointments. You remembered which teachers I didn't like. You remembered to remind me every single day that summer that I was throwing my future away on some boy who wasn't going anywhere. You remember. So look at me. Look at me and tell me the truth." Mara's chin trembled, and in that trembling Daniel Carter saw 15 years of his own life rearrange themselves. He'd spent so long believing a certain story about himself, that he was a man nobody stayed for, that the girl he'd loved at 18 had looked at him across a stairwell and felt nothing that she'd graduated and left, and moved on to bigger and better without a backward glance, exactly the way he'd always known someone like her would. He'd built his whole quiet, careful, load-bearing life on top of that story. He'd married a woman he didn't love because of that story. He'd taught himself not to want because of that story. And now the woman standing in front of him was about to tell him the story had never been true. "Mara," Claire whispered, "please. I did it for you." Mara's voice broke on the last word. The gymnasium seemed to go quiet, though of course it didn't. The music kept playing and people kept laughing somewhere, but for the three of them, a silence closed in like a fist. "What did you say?" Claire breathed. "I did it for you." Mara's eyes were wet now, and her whole polished composure was coming apart at the seams right there in front of everyone. "You want the truth, fine. Here's the truth. Yes, I took the letter. I read it. And I threw it away. And I never gave it to him. And I told you he didn't want you. I did all of it. And I would do it again." Claire made a sound, not a word, just a sound like something being torn. Daniel felt his hands go numb. "You threw it away," he said. "I did what your mother should have thanked me for," Mara said, whirling on him now, and the tears were falling, but her voice had turned hard, defensive, cornered. "You want to stand here and act like the victim? She was 18. She had a full scholarship. She had a future, a real future, the kind of future our family had never once had, and she was about to blow it up over you. Over a boy who ate lunch alone in the library. A boy whose father drank. A boy going nowhere." "Mara!" Claire's voice was a whip. "It's the truth," Mara shot back. "You want the truth? You get all of it. I looked at that letter, Claire. I read every word of it. I read you telling this nothing of a boy that you loved him, that you'd give up Chicago, that you'd stay in Brookhaven if he wanted you to. Stay. In Brookhaven. And I thought, over my dead body. Over my dead body does my baby sister throw her whole life in the trash for a boy who's going to spend the rest of his in this town going nowhere." Daniel didn't move. He couldn't. Every word was a small, precise cut. "And look at me," he said quietly. "Right, isn't that what you're thinking? Look at him. Insurance adjuster in Columbus. Divorced. Raising a kid alone. You were right." Mara's mouth opened and closed. "That's what you're going to tell yourself tonight." Daniel went on, and his voice was so calm, it frightened even him. "You're going to go home, and you're going to look in the mirror, and you're going to say, 'Well, I was right about him, wasn't I? Nothing man. Nowhere life. I saved my sister from that.'" "Daniel," Claire said. "But here's the thing. You don't get to know Mara." He took a step forward. "You don't get to know who I'd have been. Nobody does. Because you took the one thing that might have changed everything, and you put it in the trash. So don't you dare stand there 15 years later and tell me the life I ended up with proves you were right. You don't get to break a man's leg and then point at his limp." The silence after that was absolute. Mara stared at him. Her wine glass was shaking so hard the surface trembled. And for one moment, one single moment, Daniel saw something behind the cruelty, behind the defensiveness, behind the 15 years of self-justification. He saw fear. Not fear of being caught, fear of being right. Fear that maybe if she'd handed over that letter, everything might have turned out fine, and all her careful protecting had protected nothing at all, had only stolen and burned. "You don't understand," Mara said, but the fight had gone out of it. "You don't have a sister. You don't know what it's like to watch someone you love about to make the worst mistake of their—" "It wasn't your choice to make," Claire said. She said it so softly that at first Daniel wasn't sure Mara had heard. "What?" Mara said. "It wasn't your choice." Claire's tears were falling freely now, but her voice had steadied into something Daniel had never heard from her, something older, something final. "It was mine. It was my letter, my heart, my life. And you decided you knew better. You decided you got to reach into my chest and rearrange everything and never tell me. For 15 years, Mara, 15 years I thought a man I loved looked at my heart and threw it away. Do you understand what that did to me? Do you have any idea what I did with that, who I became because of it? I was trying to— I know what you were trying to do." Claire's voice rose. "You were always trying. You were always trying to run my life. Since Mom got sick, since Dad left, you appointed yourself the one who knew best, and I let you. I let you do it for years, because I thought that's what love was. I thought love was letting the person who's scared for you make your decisions. But this—" she pressed her hand to her chest. "This was mine, and you took it." Mara was crying openly now, and the terrible thing Daniel thought was that her tears looked real. That was the part that had no clean answer. She hadn't done it out of hatred. She'd done it out of a love so twisted and controlling and afraid that it had convinced itself it was protection. She'd looked at a scared 18-year-old boy and a scholarship and made a calculation, and she'd been so certain she was right that she'd been willing to lie for 15 years to protect the certainty. "I have to get out of here," Claire said suddenly. "Claire—" Mara reached for her. "Don't touch me." Claire pulled her arm away so sharply that wine sloshed over Mara's hand. "Don't. I can't. I can't look at you right now. I have to get out of this room." And she turned, and she walked fast toward the doors at the back of the gymnasium. And Daniel stood there for one frozen second, caught between the woman falling apart in front of him and the woman disappearing through the doors. And then his body made the decision. His mind couldn't. He went after her. "Claire. Claire, wait." He caught up to her in the hallway, outside the long tiled hallway that ran past the trophy cases and the rows of lockers, the same hallway where 15 years ago he'd stood at his locker and watched her walk and never once found the courage to say a single word. She had her back to him. Her shoulders were shaking. "Claire, don't," she said without turning around. "Please don't be nice to me right now. If you're nice to me right now, I'm going to completely fall apart, and I can't do that in a hallway." Daniel stopped a few feet behind her. "Okay," he said. "I won't be nice." She let out a sound that was half a sob and half a laugh. "That was a joke," she said. "That was the worst timed joke in human history, and I'm laughing anyway. That's how God, Daniel." She turned around. Her makeup had run. She didn't seem to care. 15 years. She looked me in the face and lied to me for 15 years. Every phone call, every Christmas. Every time I told her I couldn't figure out why I couldn't stay in a relationship, why I kept picking men who'd leave before they got close every single time, she just let me believe it. She let me believe you didn't want me. "I know. You don't know," her voice cracked. "You can't, because you got to build your life around not being wanted. But I got to build mine around being rejected. Do you understand the difference? You thought you were forgettable. I thought I offered someone everything I had, and they threw it in the garbage. Those are different wounds, Daniel." He stood there and took it, and the awful thing was, she was right, and he knew she was right, and there was nothing to say. But he'd taught himself over 15 years to stand still and take the true thing without flinching, and so he did. "Tell me what the letter said," he said quietly. Claire's breath caught. "What?" "You wrote it," he said. "You remember it. Nobody forgets a thing like that. Tell me what it said." She stared at him. And for a long moment, he thought he'd asked for too much, that he'd pushed on the one thing too raw to touch. But then, Claire closed her eyes, and when she spoke, Her voice had gone soft and far away, like she was reading off the inside of her own eyelids. "I said I'd watched you for 2 years," she said, "in the stairwell by the science wing. That you always sat on the 3rd step with a book and you never knew I could see you from the landing. I said I used to make up excuses to go that way between classes just so I could walk past you." Her voice trembled. "I said I was a coward. That I'd had 100 chances to talk to you, and I let every one of them go by because I was scared, and now I was about to leave, and I couldn't leave without you knowing. I said—" She stopped. "Say it," Daniel whispered. "I said if you felt anything back." Claire went on, tears sliding down. "Even a little, I would stay. I'd give up Chicago. I'd defer the scholarship a year. I'd stay in Brookhaven, and we could figure it out. I said I knew it was crazy, and I said it anyway, because I'd rather be crazy and honest than smart and silent." She wiped at her face. "And then I signed it, and I gave it to my sister. And I waited 3 weeks for you to say something, anything, and you never did. And I decided that silence was your answer, and I got on a plane." Daniel felt something in his chest that he didn't have a name for. It wasn't grief exactly, though there was grief in it. It was closer to vertigo, the sensation of looking down and realizing the ground you'd walked on your whole life had been painted over a hole. "I would have stayed," he said. Claire went still. "What if I'd gotten that letter?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "Claire, if I'd read those words at 18 that you'd watched me in the stairwell, that you'd walked that way on purpose, that you'd give up Chicago." He shook his head slowly. "I didn't think anyone saw me. That was the entire way I understood myself back then. I was invisible, and I thought that was safer than the alternative, which was being seen and found lacking. And you're telling me you saw me the whole time, on the 3rd step, with my book." "I saw you the whole time," Claire said. "I would have stayed too," Daniel said. "I would have burned Chicago to the ground to keep you here. I'd have God, Claire, I built a whole life on the idea that I was a man nobody chose, and you chose me. 15 years ago you chose me, and I never even got to know." They stood there in the hallway 6 feet apart, the noise of the reunion bleeding faintly through the doors, and for a moment neither of them said anything, because there was nothing large enough to say. And then a door opened behind them, and Mara's voice wrecked, and Small said, "Claire, I still have it." They both turned. Mara was standing in the doorway. Her mascara ruined her elegant composure, gone entirely. She had her phone clutched in one hand and her purse in the other, and she looked for the first time in Daniel's memory like a person and not a performance. "You have what?" Claire said. "The letter." Mara's voice shook. I told you I threw it away, but I didn't. I couldn't. I read it and I meant to throw it away, and I couldn't make myself do it, so I kept it. It's in a box, in my closet, in Cincinnati. I've had it for 15 years. The hallway tilted. Daniel actually reached out and put a hand against the trophy case to steady himself. "You kept it?" Claire said. Her voice had gone dangerously quiet. "You kept it. For 15 years. You lied to me. You told me you gave it to him. You told me he rejected me. You watched me struggle for 15 years. And the whole time, you had the actual letter in a box in your closet." "Claire, why?" Claire's voice broke into a near scream. "Why would you keep it? Why would you keep the one piece of evidence that could destroy the lie if you were so sure you'd done the right thing? Why not burn it? Why not?" "Because I knew," Mara sobbed. Everything stopped. "I knew I was wrong," Mara said, and it came pouring out of her now, 15 years of it all at once. "I knew the second I read it. It wasn't some silly teenage crush, it was the way you wrote about him, Claire. I read it, and I sat in that kitchen, and I knew it was real, and I knew if I gave it to him it might actually work, and that scared me more than anything. So I told myself I was protecting you. But the truth is, I couldn't stand the thought of you choosing him over the life I'd sacrificed everything to give you. I gave up college for you. I gave up my 20s for you after Mom died, after Dad left. I raised you, and I couldn't watch you take everything I'd bled for and hand it to a boy in a library. She was shaking so hard now she could barely stand. "And I couldn't burn the letter?" she whispered, "because burning it would have meant admitting I'd done something that could never be undone. As long as I kept it, some part of me pretended it wasn't final, pretended I could fix it someday. But I never did. Every year I told myself, next year, I'll tell her, next year. And 15 years went by, and you never fell in love. You never let anyone close. And I watched that, Claire. I watched what I did to you every year, and I still couldn't open my mouth." Claire had both hands pressed over her mouth. She was crying without sound. "So, no," Mara finished, barely audible. "I wasn't sure I was right. I've never once been sure. I've spent 15 years being the most terrified I've ever been in my life that I was completely, catastrophically wrong. And tonight I walked into that room, and I saw the two of you standing together, and I knew the second I saw your faces that I was." For a long moment, nobody moved. Daniel looked at this woman who had stolen 15 years of his life, and he found to his own confusion that he could not summon pure hatred for her. What he felt was worse and more complicated than hatred, because he recognized her. He recognized the fear that dresses up as protection. He recognized the person who is so afraid of the people they love making a mistake that they'll make a far worse one to prevent it. He'd been a version of that his whole adult life, so afraid of being hurt that he'd built a life designed to keep everyone at a safe, cold distance, including his own ex-wife, including, God help him, sometimes even his own daughter. Mara had stolen his life out of fear. He'd surrendered his out of the same thing. "I want the letter," Claire said. Mara nodded quickly. "Yes, of course. I can drive to Cincinnati tonight. I'll get it. I'll bring it to you, whatever you—" "Not for me," Claire said. Mara stopped. "For him." Claire turned and looked at Daniel, and her eyes were red and streaming and absolutely certain. "It was always for him. I wrote it to him. He should have had it 15 years ago. He's going to have it now. That's the one thing you can do, Mara, the one thing. You're going to bring me that letter, and I'm going to give it to Daniel, and he's finally going to read the words that were his to read all along." Mara's face crumpled. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, I'll get it. Tonight," Claire said. "Tonight." And then Claire did something that Daniel would think about for a long time afterward. She didn't scream anymore. She didn't hit her sister, though she'd have had every right. She just looked at Mara for a long, long moment, and then she said in a voice scraped down to nothing, "I don't know if I'll ever forgive you. I want you to understand that. I might not. This might be the thing I can't come back from. But even if I can't, even if this is the end of us, you are still going to bring me that letter, because it was never yours to keep. Do you understand? It was never ever yours." Mara nodded, unable to speak. And she turned and she walked back through the doors, and a moment later, Daniel saw through the glass that she was crossing the parking lot toward her car, alone. A woman going to retrieve the evidence of her own worst act because the sister she'd spent her life controlling had finally, at long last, given her an order she had no right to refuse. Daniel and Claire stood in the hallway. "She's really going to drive to Cincinnati," Daniel said. "Right now, tonight." "She's going to drive to Cincinnati right now tonight," Claire confirmed and let out a broken, exhausted laugh. "Because for once in her life, she doesn't have a choice. She spent 15 years taking my choices away from me. It only seems fair." Daniel looked at her. "How are you?" he asked. "Right now, this second. How are you actually doing?" Claire opened her mouth to answer, and then her face just folded. All the fight and the fury and the certainty she'd been holding up drained out of her at once, and what was left underneath was a woman who had just learned that the deepest wound of her entire adult life had been inflicted by the one person she'd trusted most in the world. "I feel like my whole life is a lie," she said. "Claire, no, I mean it. Think about it, Daniel." Her voice was rising, unspooling. "Every relationship I ever ended, every good man I pushed away because I was so sure that the second I actually cared about someone, they'd look at everything I was and decide it wasn't enough. I built that. That's the architecture of my whole adult life, and it's built on a lie my sister told me. I have wasted so many years." She pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes. "I'm 40 next year, Daniel. I'm 40, and I'm alone, and I did it to myself, except I didn't. She did it to me, except I let her. Except I didn't even know. I don't even know whose fault it is anymore. I don't know how to be angry at the right person. Hey." Daniel crossed the distance between them without deciding to. "Hey, look at me." She looked at him. "You didn't waste anything," he said. "You hear me? Nothing you lived was a waste. Everything you built, everything you survived, all the years, that's yours. That's real. She stole one letter. She didn't get to steal you. You're still standing here. You're still the person who watched a scared kid in a stairwell and had the courage to write it all down and hand it to somebody. That courage didn't disappear. It's the same courage that just walked out of that gymnasium and demanded the truth. You're not a wasted life, Claire. You're a person who got lied to. Those are different things." Claire looked at him like he'd said something in a language she'd forgotten she spoke. "When did you get like this?" she whispered. "Like what?" "Wise, steady. You were the quietest boy in the entire school. You never said 10 words at once, and now you're standing in a hallway telling me exactly the thing I needed somebody to tell me for 15 years. She shook her head, wondering. "What happened to you?" Daniel thought about it. He thought about Emma asleep at home with Rosa watching over her. He thought about the divorce and the woman who'd told him he was there through a window. He thought about 15 years of measuring other people's disasters and staying calm through all of them. "I had to grow up fast," he said finally. "I had a kid before I was ready. Marriage fell apart. And when you're a single father, you don't really get the luxury of being the quiet, invisible guy anymore. Somebody's counting on you to show up and be steady, even when you're falling apart inside. So you learn. You learn how to hold the calm, even when there's no calm anywhere in you." He paused. "I got good at holding the calm for everybody else. I just never had anybody hold it for me." Claire's eyes filled again. "Where's her mother?" she asked. "Emma's mother. Arizona. She left 3 years ago. It's—" Daniel exhaled. It's fine now. It wasn't a good marriage. We both knew it going in honestly. I married someone I didn't love because I was so sure love wasn't in the cards for a man like me. And she married someone who was never fully there. So." He shrugged a small, helpless motion. "It ended the way that kind of marriage ends. But I got Emma out of it, so I can't call it a mistake. Best thing that ever happened to me came out of the worst decision I ever made. You married someone you didn't love." Claire repeated slowly. "Because you were sure love wasn't in the cards for a man like you." "Yeah." "Because you thought you were forgettable." "Yeah." "Because the one girl who ever wanted you never said anything." Claire said, her voice breaking. "And you took her silence as proof. And you organized your entire life around the proof." Daniel didn't answer. He didn't have to. "Oh, Daniel," Claire whispered. "We did the exact same thing, both of us. We both took that silence, and we both decided it meant we weren't worth loving. You married a woman you didn't love. I pushed away every man who might have loved me. Same wound, same lie, same 15 years. Just different rooms. And there it was, the thing that had been sitting under the whole conversation finally spoken out loud. Two people who'd loved each other at 18, who'd been pulled apart by a single stolen letter, and who had spent 15 years living out the exact same tragedy in 2 different cities, never knowing the other one was doing it too. Daniel felt his throat close. "I don't know what to do with this," he admitted, and it was the most honest thing he'd said in years. Claire, I don't know what a person is supposed to do with this. We can't get the 15 years back. I have a daughter. You have a life in Chicago. We're not 18. I don't know how to be handed this and know what to do with it." "I don't either," Claire said. "So what do we do?" Claire wiped her face with the back of her hand and let out a long, shaky breath. And when she looked at him again, there was something steadier in her, something that had found its footing. "Right now," she said. "Right now, we don't do anything. Right now, my sister is driving to Cincinnati to bring back a letter I wrote you when I was 18 years old. And I think before either of us tries to figure out the next 15 years, you should get to read the last 15. You should read what I actually said. Not my memory of it. Not me telling you in a hallway. The real thing. In my real handwriting, from when I was really that girl on the landing watching you on the third step. Her voice trembled. You've waited 15 years for that letter, Daniel, even if you didn't know you were waiting. I think you should get to actually read it before we decide anything at all. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Okay, he said quietly. Okay. We wait for the letter. And somewhere out on the highway between Brookhaven and Cincinnati, Mara Whitmore drove alone through the dark, with both hands white-knuckled on the wheel, toward a box in a closet she'd been afraid to open for 15 years, carrying the weight of the single worst thing she had ever done while behind her, in a school hallway lined with the trophies of children who'd all grown up and scattered. The two people whose lives she had quietly rearranged stood together for the first time in a decade and a half and waited for the truth to come home. They didn't go back into the reunion. Neither of them said it out loud, but the decision was made in the space of a shared glance that whatever they were now, it did not belong in a gymnasium full of people laughing over cheese cubes and comparing salaries. Daniel led them out a side door into the cool night, and they sat on the low concrete steps at the edge of the parking lot, two grown people in their reunion clothes, and they waited. She won't be back for at least 3 hours, Claire said. Cincinnati and back, even driving like a maniac. Then we've got 3 hours. For what? Daniel thought about it. For everything we never got to say the first time. Claire let out a breath that was almost a laugh. 15 years of it. In 3 hours. We can try. She pulled her knees up and wrapped her arms around them, and for a while she didn't say anything at all, and Daniel let the silence be. He'd learned that too in his line of work, that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for a person in shock is give them room to sit in it. Can I ask you something? Claire said finally. Anything. That summer. After graduation. Before I left. She turned to look at him. What were you doing? Where were you? While I was waiting for you to answer a letter, you never got what was actually happening in your life. Daniel leaned back on his hands and looked up at the dark. My dad was dying, he said. Claire went still. That summer. That whole summer. Liver finally gave out. Years of drinking it. He shrugged. It was ugly at the end, and I was the only one there. My mom had already left him by then, and I don't blame her, but it meant it was just me. 19 years old, sitting in a hospice, watching a man I had every reason to hate die slowly, and holding his hand anyway, because there wasn't anybody else to do it. He was quiet a moment. So that's what I was doing, Claire. That summer you were waiting for me to write back. I was watching my father die. Daniel, her voice cracked. I didn't know. I never knew any of that. Nobody did. I didn't tell anyone. I went to the hospice every day and I came home and I didn't talk about it because... He stopped. Because that was already who I was. The kid who didn't say things. The kid who carried it alone. Claire pressed her hand to her mouth. So even if you had gotten the letter... Oh, I'd have gotten it eventually, Daniel said. It might have taken me a few weeks. I was underwater that summer. But I'd have read it. And Claire, I need you to understand something. He turned to face her fully. If I had been sitting in that hospice watching my father die, feeling like the loneliest person in the entire world, and a letter had come telling me that Claire Whitmore had watched me for 2 years and wanted me, and would give up Chicago to stay. His voice broke just slightly. That would have saved my life. I mean that literally. That was the loneliest I have ever been before or since. And you were reaching out to me across that exact darkness, and I never knew. The one hand that reached for me in the worst summer of my life, and it never got to me. Claire was crying again quietly. She didn't just steal a romance, Daniel said, and there was a rawness in it now, the calm finally cracking. That's what I keep. That's the thing I can't get past. If it were just we might have dated, we might have fallen in love. We missed our chance that would be sad. But I could live with sad. That's not what she stole. She stole the one thing that might have reached me when I was drowning. That's different. He stopped, jaw working. I've spent 15 years being calm about everything. I'm calm on the phone when people's houses burned down. I'm calm when my wife left. I held it together through all of it. And I am sitting here and I don't feel calm at all. I feel like I want to put my fist through something. Then feel it, Claire said softly. What? Feel it, Daniel. My God. You just told me you held your father's hand while he died and never told a soul. You held your marriage together and your daughter and everyone's disasters for 15 years and stayed calm through every single one. When do you get to not be calm? When do you get to be the one who's falling apart? Her voice shook. You're allowed to be angry. You're allowed to want to put your fist through something. Somebody stole 15 years from you, from both of us. You don't have to be the steady one right now. Not with me. I'm the one person on earth who doesn't need you to be okay. Daniel looked at her, and something behind his eyes gave way. I don't know how to do that, he admitted. I genuinely don't know how. I've been the steady one so long I don't remember how to be anything else. Then we'll figure it out, Claire said. Slowly, badly, together maybe. But you don't have to hold it alone anymore. That's the entire thing my sister stole. Not just love. Not being alone with it. You've been alone with everything your whole life, and you didn't have to be because there was a girl on a landing who saw you the entire time. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. And then Daniel did something he hadn't done in front of another adult in more years than he could count. He put his face in his hands, and his shoulders shook, and he cried not loudly, not dramatically, but the deep, silent way of a man who has held something for far too long and is finally in front of the one person safe enough to see it setting it down. Claire didn't say anything. She just put her hand on his back between his shoulder blades and left it there. And they sat like that on the concrete steps in the dark, and for the first time in 15 years, Daniel Carter wasn't carrying it alone. When it passed, he wiped his face and let out a long, unsteady breath and laughed a little embarrassed. Sorry, he said. Don't. Claire's voice was fierce. Don't you dare apologize for that. Old habit. I know. Break it. He laughed again, wetter this time, and for a moment, the weight lifted enough that they could both breathe. And then Claire's phone buzzed. She looked down at it. Her face changed. It's Mara, she said. Daniel straightened. Already? She can't be there yet. Claire answered it. Mara, slow down. Slow down. I can't what? She listened, and Daniel watched her expression shift from confusion to something sharper. What do you mean, it's not there? Mara. Mara, breathe. Where is it then? A long pause. Claire's hand went to her forehead. What do you mean you moved it? When did you okay? Okay. Where is it now? Another pause longer. You're kidding. You have got to be kidding me. What? Daniel said. What is it? Claire held up a finger. No, I hear you. I understand. Just get there. However long it takes, get there and get it and call me the second you have it in your hand. And Mara. Her voice hardened. Do not come back to me without it. I mean it. Do not. She hung up. Claire. What happened? Claire exhaled slowly, staring at her phone. She got to Cincinnati. She went to the closet. The box wasn't there. She looked up at him. 2 years ago, she went through a divorce of her own. She moved, and when she moved, she put a bunch of boxes in a storage unit, one of those rented units on the edge of town, and she thinks the letter is in one of them. She doesn't know which one. There's like a dozen boxes. Daniel stared at her. So she's going to a storage unit, in the middle of the night, to dig through a dozen unlabeled boxes looking for a 15-year-old envelope. Claire pressed her lips together, and then impossibly a small hysterical laugh escaped her. This is insane. This is completely insane. My sister is currently driving to a storage facility at 10 o'clock at night to excavate the single worst decision of her life out of a cardboard box because I ordered her to. Is she going to find it? I don't know. Claire's laugh died. She sounded Daniel, she sounded terrified. Not of the drive. She's terrified she won't find it. Because if she can't find it, then there's no letter, and it's just her word against nothing. And she'll have confessed to the worst thing she ever did, with nothing to show for it, no way to make it even a little bit right. She shook her head. For the first time in her life, she's not in control of the outcome. She can't manage this one. She can't fix it with a good story. Either that box has the letter, or it doesn't, and there's nothing her being clever can do about it. Daniel was quiet a moment. How do you feel about that? Claire considered the question honestly. I don't know. Part of me, God help me, part of me almost feels bad for her. She sounded so scared. She rubbed her eyes. And then another part of me thinks good. Good. Let her feel for one night, one single night, what it's like to have something that matters to you completely out of your hands. Because that's what she did to me for 15 years, and she never once had to feel it herself. Both of those can be true, Daniel said. Can they? I think that's what family is, honestly. Loving somebody and being furious at them, and feeling sorry for them all at the same time, and never being able to fully separate any of it. He shrugged. I held my father's hand while he died, and I hated him the whole time, and I loved him the whole time, and I've never once been able to untangle the two. So yeah, I think both can be true. Claire looked at him for a long moment. You really did grow up, didn't you? I told you, I didn't have a choice. They sat with that. The parking lot had gone quieter. People were starting to leave, the reunion headlights swinging across them as cars pulled out. Nobody stopped. Nobody recognized the two people sitting on the steps as anyone worth stopping for. They were in that moment exactly as invisible as Daniel had spent his whole life making himself, and for once it felt like a gift rather than a wound, the privacy to fall apart and put themselves back together without an audience. Can I ask you something now? Daniel said. Fair's fair. That night, when you decided to write the letter, instead of just talking to me, he looked at her. Why, we had 2 years. We were in the same building every single day for 2 years. Why the letter? Why not just walk up to me in the stairwell one time and say something? Claire was quiet for a long moment. Because I was a coward, she said finally. I told you that's what I wrote. And it was true. But it's more than that. She pulled her knees tighter. You have to understand what my house was like, Daniel. After my mom got sick and my dad left, Mara ran everything. And I mean everything. What I wore, what I ate, who I was allowed to be friends with, what colleges I applied to. She was 19 and I was 15, and she just took over. And she wasn't wrong to exactly, somebody had to, but the way she did it, I grew up learning that everything I wanted had to be run past her first. That my own desires weren't safe until she'd approved them. Daniel felt something cold settle in his stomach as the shape of it came clear. So when I finally wanted something for myself, Claire went on, something that was mine, something I hadn't asked permission for you. I didn't even know how to just go get it. I didn't have that muscle. I'd never once in my life just walked up and taken something I wanted. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I wrote it down, so I could get the words exactly right, so I could be brave on paper in a way I could never be brave in person. And then, her voice caught, and then I handed it to the one person I'd been trained my whole life to hand everything to. My sister. For approval. For safekeeping. God. Daniel, don't you see I didn't just accidentally give the letter to the wrong person? I gave it to exactly the person my whole childhood had trained me to give it to. The one thing that was finally mine, and I still couldn't help running it through her first. The full horror of it landed on both of them at the same time. She raised you to bring everything to her, Daniel said slowly. And then when you finally for the first time brought her the one thing you actually wanted for yourself, she destroyed it, Claire whispered. Because it was the one thing that would have taken me out of her control. It was the first choice I ever made without her, and she couldn't let me have it, because if I could choose you, I could choose anything, and then I wouldn't need her anymore. She was crying again. That's what it was really about. It was never really about the scholarship or Chicago or you not being good enough. It was about her losing me. She couldn't stand to lose me, so she made sure I stayed. Daniel didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. The thing they'd uncovered was too large and too sad for words, and it was still unfolding. Still getting worse the more they looked at it. This 15-year-old wound that kept revealing new depths every time they thought they'd reached the bottom. And it worked, Claire said bitterly. That's the sickest part. It worked. I never left her, not really. I moved to Chicago physically, but emotionally, I stayed exactly where she put me. I called her every week. I ran my life past her every step of the way. I never fell in love, never got married, never built anything that would have pulled me out of her orbit. I stayed hers. For 15 years I stayed hers, and I never knew that the reason I couldn't move on was sitting in a box in her closet the whole time. Daniel reached over and took her hand. He didn't decide to do it. It just happened the way the truest things always seem to happen between them, without permission, without a plan. And Claire looked down at their hands, his rough and steady over hers, and she didn't pull away. Listen to me, Daniel said. You just figured something out tonight that some people never figure out their whole lives. You just saw the shape of the thing that was controlling you. That's not nothing. That's Claire, that's everything. You can't change something you can't see. You just saw it. 15 years late, sure. But you saw it. And she can't put you back in the box now. Not now that you know the box exists. Claire let out a shaky breath. When did you get so? If you say wise again, I'm going to walk into traffic. She laughed, startled, a real laugh, and it broke the tension enough that they could both breathe again. And for a moment, sitting there on the steps, holding hands in the dark, they were almost happy, two people who'd found each other again, across an impossible distance, who'd uncovered the truth at last, who were finally seeing each other clearly. And then, Claire's phone buzzed again. She snatched it up. Mara, did you find... She stopped. Her face went slack. What? What do you mean the units... She stood up abruptly, the phone pressed hard to her ear. Mara, slow down, you're not making sense. What happened to the storage unit? Daniel stood too, his stomach dropping. A fire! Claire's voice went shrill. When? How much of it? Mara, is my letter is the letter... She listened, and Daniel watched every ounce of color leave her face, and he knew before she said a word that something had gone very wrong. Claire lowered the phone slowly. There was a fire at the storage facility, she said in a voice gone flat and distant. 8 months ago. Electrical thing. It didn't burn the whole place down, but it hit a section of the units. Hers was in that section. She swallowed. She never got the notice. Or she got it and ignored it because she never went there. She didn't care about any of it. She doesn't know if her unit was one of the ones that burned, or one of the ones that got smoke and water damage, or one of the ones that was fine. She won't know until she gets there and opens it. So the letter might be ash, Claire said. 15 years. She kept it 15 years through a divorce, through a move, through everything. She kept the one piece of evidence that could prove the truth. And there's a chance, a real chance, that 8 months ago it burned in a storage unit fire she didn't even know about. Her voice cracked completely. And she never even knew. She spent 15 years too much of a coward to give it to us, and too much of a coward to destroy it, and the universe might have just done it for her. Without asking anybody. Daniel felt the ground go out from under him for the second time that night. How far is she from the unit? 20 minutes. She's driving there now. Claire's hands were shaking. 20 minutes and then we'll know. 20 minutes and we find out whether the actual letter still exists in the world or whether it's gone. Whether you get to read it or whether you spend the rest of your life knowing exactly what it said. Because I told you in a hallway, but never getting to see it. Never getting to hold the real thing. Daniel took both her hands now. Hey, look at me. She looked at him terrified. Whatever's in that unit, he said, doesn't change what's true. You wrote it. You meant it. You told me every word tonight, and I believe you. If the letter's ash, I still know. I still heard it. She can't burn that. It already reached me. It took 15 years and it came through your own mouth instead of the paper. But it reached me, Claire. It's already here. Whatever your sister opens that door and finds it already got to me. Claire looked at him and her eyes overflowed, and she said in a very small voice, "But I want you to see it. Do you understand? I need it to not have all been for nothing. I need one physical thing in the world that proves I tried, that I wasn't a coward the whole way, that one time I was brave enough to reach for something. If that burned, then there's nothing left to show for it, except my word and her guilt and 15 wasted years, and I can't, Daniel. I can't stand for that to be all that's left." "Then we wait 20 minutes, Daniel said quietly, "and we find out. Together. Whatever it is, you don't find out alone, not this time." Claire nodded, unable to speak, and gripped his hands like they were the only thing holding her upright. And somewhere across the state line, a woman who had spent 15 years controlling everything she could reach drove through the dark toward a storage unit that might or might not still contain the proof of her greatest sin. A door she was about to open with no idea whether behind it lay redemption or ash. While on a set of concrete steps outside their old high school, the two people whose entire lives hung on what she'd find sat pressed together in the cold, holding hands, holding their breath and counting down the 20 longest minutes either of them had ever lived. The 20 minutes did not pass quickly. They tried to fill them with words, and then they gave up on words and just sat, and Claire held her phone in both hands and stared at it like she could will it to ring. Daniel watched the side of her face and thought about how strange it was that a man could spend 15 years feeling nothing and then have all of it come flooding back in a single night, in a parking lot next to a woman he'd loved when he was a boy. "Talk to me," Claire said suddenly. "I can't sit here in silence. I'll lose my mind. Talk to me about something, anything. Tell me about your daughter." So Daniel told her about Emma. He told her how Emma had been born 6 weeks early, so small he'd been afraid to hold her, and how he'd sat by the incubator every night for a month and made promises to a 2-pound person who couldn't hear him. He told her about Emma's obsession with dinosaurs, and how she corrected adults who got the facts wrong, and how she'd recently informed her second-grade teacher that pterodactyls were not technically dinosaurs and had been sent home with a note. He told her that Emma had his quietness, but not his fear that she was quiet the way a person is quiet when they're thinking not quiet, the way a person is quiet when they're hiding. "She's braver than I ever was," Daniel said. "At 7, she walks up to other kids at the playground and just introduces herself, sticks out her little hand. 'Hi, I'm Emma.' I watch her do it, and I can't believe she came out of me. Where did she learn that? Not from me. I never once in my life walked up to anybody." Claire smiled through her fear. "Maybe she learned it because you never made her afraid. Maybe the bravest thing you did was not pass down the thing that got passed to you." Daniel went quiet. "That's the whole game, isn't it?" Claire said softly. "Not passing it down. My mom passed her fear to Mara, and Mara passed it to me, and I've spent my whole life running that same program. But you got handed a father who drank and left you alone with his dying, and somehow you raised a 7-year-old who sticks her hand out at strangers. You broke the chain, Daniel. You already did the hardest thing a person can do, and you don't even know you did it." He didn't answer because he couldn't, but he reached over and took her hand again, and this time he didn't let go. And then the phone rang. Claire jolted like she'd been shocked. She fumbled it, nearly dropped it, got it to her ear. "Mara, are you there? Did you—" She stopped. Her whole body went rigid. "You're inside the unit. Okay, what does it look like? Is it Mara? Is it burned?" Daniel couldn't breathe. "There's water damage." Claire relayed, her voice thin. "The sprinklers went off, so it's not burned, but a lot of it got soaked. Some of the boxes are Mara." "Which box? Do you remember which box you put it in?" "You don't know." Okay. You have to open them. All of them. One at a time." She pressed her free hand over her mouth. "How many are left?" 9. "Okay, 9 boxes. Start opening them." The line stayed open. Daniel could hear it faintly, the sound of cardboard tearing of packing tape, ripping of a woman breathing hard, 3 states of panic deep. Claire held the phone between them so he could hear too, and they sat with their heads bent together over the little speaker, listening to Mara Whitmore dig through the ruins of her own life, looking for the proof of her worst mistake. Nothing in the first one. Mara's voice came muffled, shaking. It's just books. It's old textbooks. They're ruined. But there's no okay. Next one. Keep going, Claire said. You're doing fine. Keep going. Another box. Another rip of tape. Old clothes. Just clothes. God, they smell like smoke, no letter. Next. How many now? 7 left. Claire, what if... Mara's voice broke. What if it's not here? What if I put it somewhere else? What if I threw it out during the move, and I don't even remember? What if I've been telling you it exists, and it doesn't even... Mara? Claire's voice cut through hard and steady. Stop. Do not spiral. Open the next box. Just the next one. Don't think about all of them. 1 box. Open 1 box. There was a pause, and then the sound of tape. Daniel realized he was gripping Claire's hand hard enough to hurt. He made himself loosen it. Claire didn't seem to notice. Her whole being was poured into the phone. Photo albums, Mara said. Just pictures. From when we were kids. Oh. Her voice changed. Oh, Claire, there's one of you and Mom. From before she got sick. You're so little. You're maybe 4. You're on her lap and you're both... Mara, focus, Claire said, but her voice cracked on it. Please, the letter. Focus on the letter. Right, sorry, next box. They listened to 5 more boxes. Kitchen things wrapped in newspaper. A box of Christmas ornaments, half of them shattered. Financial paperwork from a marriage that had ended. A box of Mara's own things from college, the college she'd started and never finished because their mother got sick and somebody had to raise Claire. And with each box, that wasn't the one, the tension wound tighter until Daniel felt like the night itself might snap. 2 left, Mara said, and her voice was barely holding. Claire, 2 boxes left, and if it's not in these, then it's not there, Claire said quietly. And we'll deal with that. But it might be. Open it. Tape ripped. Silence. Mara. Nothing. Mara, talk to me. What's in the box? And then Mara Whitmore made a sound that Daniel would remember for the rest of his life. It wasn't a word. It was a raw, cracked, wounded sound, the sound of a person confronting something they've been running from for 15 years, and it came down the phone line and filled the whole night. Mara. Claire was on her feet. What is it? What's wrong? Talk to me. It's here, Mara sobbed. Claire, oh my God, it's here, it's right here, it's in a Ziploc bag, I put it in a Ziploc bag. I must have, I don't even remember doing it, but it's sealed. It's in a bag. And the box got wet, but the bag kept it dry. Claire, it's dry. The envelope is dry. It's your handwriting's on the front. It says his name, it says Daniel in your handwriting, and it's real. It's really here, I have it in my hand. Claire's legs gave out. She sat back down hard on the step, and then she started to cry, not the sharp crying of the night so far, but something deeper, something that came up from 15 years down, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. And Daniel put his arm around her and held her while she came apart, and he found that his own face was wet too. It's okay, he kept saying uselessly into her hair. It's okay. It's here. It's okay. 15 years? Claire sobbed. 15 years, and it's in a Ziploc bag in a burned-out storage unit, and it survived. It actually survived it, Daniel. It's real. It's still real. It didn't burn. It didn't burn, he said. It's coming home. Claire took the phone back with a shaking hand. Mara, listen to me. Do not open it. Do you hear me? Do not open that bag. Do not read it again. It's not yours. You already read it once and you had no right, and you're not going to do it again. You put it in the car, sealed exactly as it is, and you drive it back here and you hand it to Daniel, and that's the last time you touch it. Do you understand me? I understand, Mara whispered. Say it back. I won't open it. I'll bring it straight back. I'll give it to him." A pause, and then, in a voice so small it barely traveled. "Claire, I'm so sorry. I know it's nothing. I know sorry is nothing after this, but I have to say it. I'm so sorry. I've never been so sorry for anything in my life." Claire was quiet for a long moment. "I know you are," she said finally. "That's not the same as forgiving you. But I know you are. Now drive carefully. Don't you dare get in an accident with that letter in the car after all this. Drive slow and drive safe and bring it home." She hung up. For a while, neither of them spoke. Claire sat with the dead phone in her lap and stared at nothing, and Daniel kept his arm around her, and the enormity of it settled over both of them slowly. The letter existed. After 15 years after a marriage, a divorce, a move, a fire, a flood, after everything the world had thrown at it, the letter existed, and it was in a car right now, driving toward them through the dark. "I don't know what I'm feeling," Claire said finally. "You don't have to know." "No, I mean—" She turned to look at him. "I thought I'd feel relieved, and I do. But there's this other thing, this Daniel, I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of you reading it." She wrapped her arms around herself. "This whole night, I've wanted nothing more than for you to finally read it, and now it's actually going to happen. It's really coming, and what if it's not what you're imagining? What if 15 years built it up into something in your head, and the real thing is just the ramblings of a scared 18-year-old? What if you read it and it's a letdown? What if the real letter can't possibly hold the weight we've put on it?" Daniel considered this. "Claire," he said, "I don't need it to be a great letter. I've read great letters. This isn't about the writing. It's not going to be a letdown because I'm not going to be reading it as a piece of writing. I'm going to be reading it as the thing that could have saved my life 15 years ago and didn't get the chance. There's no version of that that's a letdown, even if it's 3 sentences, even if it's got spelling mistakes. I don't care. It's the letter. That's enough. It being real is enough." Claire's eyes filled again. "How do you always know exactly the right thing to say?" "I don't. I get it wrong constantly. Ask my ex-wife." He almost smiled. "But some things are easy to know. This one's easy." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat like that, and the minutes crawled by, and slowly the adrenaline of the last hour began to drain out of both of them, leaving behind a kind of hollowed-out quiet. "Can I ask you something?" Claire said after a while, her voice smaller now. "And you can say no. Ask. After tonight. After you read it. After all of this." She hesitated. "What happens to us because I've been so focused on the letter that I haven't let myself think about the real question, which is, there's a woman and a man who loved each other at 18 and got robbed of it, and now they're 33, and their whole lives are somewhere else. And even if we get the truth, even if you read every word, we can't go back and be 18. So what is this? What are we doing? Is this just closure? Do we read the letter and cry and say goodbye? And I go back to Chicago, and you go back to Columbus, and we let each other go this time on purpose instead of by accident?" Daniel didn't answer right away. "I've been thinking about that too," he admitted. And I don't know." He turned to face her. "I want to be honest with you because you deserve honesty from me, if nothing else, after everything. I have a 7-year-old daughter in Columbus. Her whole world is there, her school, her friends, her routines, the graves of both my parents, everything. I can't uproot her. And you have a whole life in Chicago, a career you built, everything you made for yourself. We're not 2 free 18-year-olds who can just decide to be together. There are real lives in the way now. Real people who depend on us." "I know," Claire whispered. "I know all that. That's what scares me." "So I'm not going to stand here and promise you a fairy tale," Daniel said. "I'm not going to say we found each other again. Let's ride off into the sunset. None of the last 15 years matter. Because they do matter. They happened. You're a whole person who lived a whole life without me. And I'm a whole person who lived a whole life without you, and we can't pretend those lives away." Claire nodded slowly, and he could see her bracing for a goodbye. "But," Daniel said, She looked up. But I also spent 15 years being a coward, he said. I let one silence a silence that wasn't even real. It turns out I let it convince me I wasn't worth loving, and I built a small, careful life around that lie, and I married a woman I didn't love, and I kept everyone at a distance, and I told myself that was just who I was. And tonight I found out the silence was a lie. There was no rejection. There was just a stolen letter. And here's what I keep thinking, Claire. If I let you walk away tonight because it's complicated, because there are logistics, because we live in different cities and have different lives, if I let that stop me, then I'm doing the exact same thing again. I'm letting a difficulty convince me I can't have the thing I want. I'm being a coward twice. And I already gave 15 years to being a coward once. I'm not doing it again. Claire had gone very still. So no, Daniel said. I don't think this is just closure. I don't want it to be. I don't know what it can be exactly. I don't know how you make a life work across 300 miles with a kid and a career and 15 years of catching up to do. I don't have that figured out. But I know I don't want to read that letter tonight and then never see you again. I know that much. Whatever this is, I don't want it to end when the sun comes up. I want to find out. I want to try. Slowly. Carefully. Realistically. But I want to try. Claire was crying again, but it was different now, and Daniel understood the difference. You mean that, she said. I've never meant anything more. Even though it's complicated, even though there's Emma, even though I'm in Chicago, especially because of all that, Daniel said. If it were easy, I wouldn't need to be brave about it. The whole point is that it's hard, and I want it anyway. That's the thing I never got to do at 18. Want something hard and reach for it anyway out loud where somebody could hear me. I'm doing it now. 15 years late. But I'm doing it. Claire launched herself at him and wrapped her arms around his neck and held on, and Daniel held her back, and for a moment on those cold concrete steps, two people who'd been robbed of everything held on to the one thing that had somehow, against all odds, survived. Not the letter. Not yet that was still on the highway, but the thing the letter had been about in the first place. The thing that had waited 15 years in two separate chests, in two separate cities, refusing to die. Okay, Claire said into his shoulder, laughing and crying at once. Okay, we try. God help us, we try. We try. They pulled back, both of them wiping their faces. Both of them laughing at what a mess they were, and for a minute the terror of the night lifted entirely, and there was just gladness, simple and enormous. And then headlights swung into the parking lot. Both of them froze. That's not her, Claire said. It's too soon. She can't be back yet. It's only been... The car pulled up close, and it wasn't Mara's car, and a man got out, and Daniel felt Claire go rigid beside him. Claire, the man called. Claire Whitmore, is that you? Claire's face had gone strange. Ethan. Daniel felt the name land in his gut. Ethan. The rumor. The reason everyone had assumed Claire left, that she'd gone off with Ethan Reyes, the golden boy, the one everyone had paired her with in their minds 15 years ago. It is you. Ethan came toward them, grinning, a big, handsome, confident man who'd clearly had a few drinks at the reunion. My God, I looked for you inside. Somebody said you'd left. I thought I missed you. What are you doing sitting out here in the... He stopped, noticing Daniel. Oh, sorry. Am I interrupting? Ethan? Claire said carefully. What are you doing here? Same as everybody, the reunion. He laughed. I've been wanting to talk to you all night. Listen, this is going to sound crazy after 15 years, but I have to get it off my chest because I've regretted it forever. He ran a hand through his hair. That summer, after graduation. I always thought, everybody thought you and I were going to end up together, right? And I was going to say something. I had this whole plan, and then you just left. You went to Chicago, and you never looked back. And I always wondered what would have happened if I'd just said something before you left. I've thought about it for 15 years, Claire. I really have. Daniel felt his stomach turn to ice. Because he could see it. He could see the whole terrible symmetry of it landing on Claire's face at the exact same moment it landed on his. Here was Ethan Reyes, the golden boy standing in a parking lot 15 years later, confessing that he too had loved Claire that summer, that he too had planned to say something, that he too had let silence swallow it. And Claire had spent 15 years believing that the man she loved had rejected her, while another man who wanted her had said nothing at all, and she'd left town carrying the weight of one silence, never knowing there'd been two. "Ethan," Claire said slowly, and Daniel could hear her mind working, putting it together. "That summer. Did my sister ever talk to you, Mara? Did she ever come to you or call you or—" Ethan blinked, surprised. "Funny you ask that. Yeah, actually, she did, right before you left. Mara pulled me aside at some graduation thing and told me—" He frowned, trying to remember. "She told me you were really into me, actually. That you were too shy to say anything, but that you liked me. And if I wanted to make a move, I should do it before you left for Chicago. I remember being so happy. And then I chickened out and you were gone, and I always figured I blew my one shot." The parking lot went dead silent. Daniel watched the truth carve itself into Claire's face line by line, and he felt it in his own chest at the same time, cold and total. "She told you I liked you," Claire repeated in a voice with nothing left in it. "Yeah. Why? Did I get that wrong?" "You didn't get it wrong," Claire said. "She lied to you. The same night. She lied to you and she lied to me on the exact same night, Ethan. She took a letter I wrote to somebody else." Claire's voice was climbing now, shaking. "And she buried it. And then she went and told you that I wanted you instead, so that if the rumor started that I'd left for you, nobody would ever go looking for the truth. She built a cover story. She built an entire cover story out of you. She pointed everyone at Ethan Reyes, so nobody would ever ask about the boy on the third step." Ethan looked utterly lost. What? What letter? Claire, what are you talking about?" But Claire had turned to Daniel, and her face was white with a fury and a grief that had found at last its true and total shape. "Do you see what she did?" she said. "Do you see how much she did? It wasn't just the letter, Daniel. It was never just the letter. She stole the letter, and then she planted a story. She made everyone believe I left for Ethan, so that the real thing would be invisible. So that even if you ever wondered, even if you ever thought about writing me, you'd hear the rumor that I'd run off with Ethan Reyes, and you'd think, well, that settles it. She never wanted me. She wanted him. She didn't just cut the thread between us. She salted the earth. She made sure that even the truth, if it ever tried to come out, would have a lie standing in front of it." Daniel understood then fully the depth of what had been done to them. It hadn't been a single moment of weakness, a scared young woman making one bad choice with a letter. It had been a construction, a deliberate, cold, layered piece of work, a lie inside a lie with a decoy planted to guard it. Mara hadn't just failed to deliver a letter. She had engineered 15 years of silence, and then she had kept the letter, and she had watched them both live inside the ruins of it, and she had said nothing. "Oh my God," Claire whispered. "Oh my God, it was worse than I thought. Every time I think I've found the bottom of what she did, there's another floor under it." Ethan was still standing there, baffled and increasingly uncomfortable. "Claire, I feel like I walked into the middle of something. Should I—" "Ethan." Claire looked at him and something in her softened, because none of it was his fault. He'd been used just like they had. "You didn't do anything wrong. You were a good guy who almost said something nice to a girl and got lied to about it by somebody with an agenda. I'm not angry at you. I need you to hear that. What happened tonight has nothing to do with you, except that you just handed me the last piece of a puzzle I've been missing for 15 years, and I thank you. I actually mean that. Thank you. But I need you to go back inside now, because my sister is about to drive back into this parking lot, and when she does, some things are going to happen that you do not want to be here for." Ethan looked between the two of them, and whatever he saw in their faces convinced him. "Okay," he said carefully. "Okay. It was good to see you, Claire, for what it's worth." And he backed away and got in his car and drove off into the night, carrying with him a piece of the truth he'd never fully understand. And then it was just the two of them again, and the weight of the new revelation and the letter still out there on the highway coming closer with every minute. "She built a whole architecture," Daniel said quietly, "just to keep us apart. To keep me." Claire corrected, and her voice had gone cold and clear. "It was always about keeping me. You were just the thing standing in the way of keeping me. Ethan was just a tool for keeping me. My whole life, my whole heart, everyone in it, we were all just pieces on a board she was moving around to make sure I never left her orbit." She stood up. "And she's driving back here right now with the one piece of evidence she couldn't quite make herself destroy. And when she gets here, Daniel, I am going to have to look at my sister, the person who raised me, the person I loved most in the world, the person who gave up her own life for me, and I am going to have to hold in my head at the same time that she did that she gave up everything for me, and that she also spent 15 years running the most elaborate, cruel, calculated lie I've ever heard of on me for me because of me. And I don't—" Her voice finally cracked. "I don't know how a person holds both of those. I don't know how you love someone and can't forgive them at the same time. I don't know how to do this." Daniel stood and took her by the shoulders. "You don't have to know tonight," he said. "You don't have to solve your entire relationship with your sister tonight in a parking lot. Tonight, you have to do exactly one thing. You have to take that letter from her hand when she gets here, and you have to give it to me, and I have to read it. That's it. That's the only thing tonight has to accomplish. Everything else, Mara forgiveness the next 15 years, all of it that can wait for tomorrow, and the day after, and every day after that for as long as it takes. But tonight is just the letter. One thing. We do one thing." Claire looked up at him, and slowly she nodded. "One thing," she repeated. "One thing." And at that moment, for the third time that night, headlights swung into the parking lot, and this time Claire's whole body went rigid, because she knew this car, she'd know it anywhere, and Daniel felt her hand find his and grip it hard enough to hurt. "That's her," Claire breathed. "Daniel, that's her. She has it. She's actually here, and she has it." The car rolled to a stop a few yards away, the engine cut, and for a long suspended moment, nobody inside it moved. The driver just sat there in the dark, a shape behind the wheel, a woman who had driven 300 miles round trip through the night to bring back the proof of the worst thing she'd ever done, and who now, at the very end of it, seemed unable to make herself open the door and carry it the last few steps. Then the door opened, and Mara Whitmore stepped out into the parking lot, holding a sealed plastic bag in both hands, like it was made of something that might shatter. And even from a distance, Daniel could see the small, pale rectangle inside it, and the dark shape of a single word written across the front in a teenage girl's careful hand. His name. Mara walked toward them slowly, and with every step she seemed to grow smaller, until by the time she reached them, she was not the polished, controlled woman who'd crossed the gymnasium hours ago. She was just a tired, frightened, hollowed-out person holding a plastic bag in both hands. She stopped a few feet away. She didn't try to smile this time. There was nothing left to perform. "I didn't open it," she said. "I want you to know that. I drove the whole way with it on the passenger seat, and I didn't open it. I wanted to. God help me, some sick part of me wanted to read it one more time the way you'd want to press on a bruise. But I didn't. You told me not to, and I didn't." "Give it to Daniel," Claire said. Mara turned to him, and for a moment the two of them just looked at each other. The man whose life she'd rewritten, and the woman who'd rewritten it. And Daniel found that all the anger he'd expected to feel in this moment wasn't the thing at the front of him. What was at the front of him was something stranger. He looked at Mara Whitmore, and he saw a person who had done a monstrous thing and had punished herself with it every single day for 15 years, and was still punishing herself now, and would keep punishing herself for the rest of her life. She hadn't gotten away with anything. Whatever she'd been protecting had rotted in her hands. "Before you give it to me," Daniel said, "I want to say one thing to you." Mara flinched, bracing for it. "I know what you did tonight cost you," he said. "I know you drove 300 miles to hand over the evidence of the worst thing you ever did. I know you could have said the storage unit burned. I know you could have told Claire it was ash, and there'd have been no way to prove otherwise, and you'd have been off the hook forever. Nobody would ever have known the letter survived. You could have lied one more time and been safe, and you didn't. You drove into the fire instead of away from it. I want you to know that I saw that." Mara's face crumpled. "That doesn't make it okay," Daniel went on, and his voice hardened. "Nothing makes it okay. You stole 15 years from two people. You watched your own sister become someone who couldn't let anyone love her, and you knew exactly why, and you said nothing. You built a lie, and you guarded it with another lie, and you let us both bleed out slowly for a decade and a half. There is no version of tonight where you get to feel clean. That's not on the table. It's never going to be on the table." "I know," Mara whispered. "But—" Daniel took a breath. "You're here. You brought it back. And that counts for something. Not enough, but something. So thank you for bringing it. And now I need you to give it to me, and then I need you to step back, because this next part isn't about you. Nothing about this next part is about you. For the first time in 15 years, this is going to be about the two people it was always supposed to be about." He held out his hand. Mara looked down at the bag. Her hands were shaking, and for one last moment she held on, not out of malice now, but out of something else, something Daniel almost understood. As long as she held the letter, she was still the center of it, still the keeper, still the one everything ran through. Handing it over meant handing over the last thing she'd controlled. It meant finally truly letting Claire have the one thing she'd spent 15 years refusing to let her have. "Mara," Claire said quietly, "let it go." And Mara Whitmore let it go. She placed the bag in Daniel's hand, and she stepped back, and she wrapped her arms around herself, and she became at last just a spectator to a story she'd tried to write and had no right to. Daniel held the bag. It weighed almost nothing. That was the thing that struck him, how light it was, this object that had bent the entire shape of his life. A few grams of paper in a plastic bag, and it had married him to the wrong woman, and taught his heart to stay behind glass, and made him a stranger to his own life. Something that light doing something that heavy. His hands weren't steady. He noticed that with a kind of distant surprise. Daniel Carter, who was steady on the phone when people's houses burned down, who was steady through his divorce, who was steady holding his father's hand while the man died. His hands were shaking now. "You don't have to read it right this second," Claire said softly. "If you need a minute?" "No." Daniel shook his head. "No. I've waited 15 years. I'm not waiting one more minute." He opened the bag. The envelope inside was slightly yellowed at the edges, but otherwise perfect. Protected all this time by a Ziploc bag Mara couldn't even remember sealing. His name was on the front in blue ink in the careful looping handwriting of an 18-year-old girl who'd taken her time, who'd wanted it to look nice. Daniel. Just his first name. She hadn't needed his last. To her, he'd only ever been one Daniel in the whole world. He slid his finger under the flap. The old glue gave way easily. He took out the letter. It was 2 pages front and back, filled edge to edge, and he could see even before he read a word that she'd written it slowly, that she'd pressed hard, that some words had been crossed out and rewritten, that in a couple of places the ink had run slightly where something wet had fallen on it 15 years ago and dried. And Daniel Carter standing in a dark parking lot outside the high school where he'd spent 4 years making himself invisible. Finally read the words that had been meant for him since he was 18. He read them silently. Claire watched him read. Mara stood a few feet back with her hand over her mouth. And nobody said anything because there was nothing to say, because the only voice that belonged in that moment was the voice of a girl who'd written it all down a lifetime ago because she was too scared to say it out loud. Daniel read about the third step in the stairwell by the science wing. He read that she'd noticed the exact book he was reading and had gone and checked it out of the library herself, so she'd have something to say to him someday, and then never worked up the nerve. He read that she thought his quietness wasn't emptiness the way other people seemed to think, but fullness, that she'd always suspected there was an entire world going on behind his eyes, and she'd wanted more than she'd ever wanted anything to be let into it. He read that she was leaving for Chicago in 3 weeks, and that the thought of leaving without him ever knowing was worse than the thought of him not feeling the same. He read that she'd rather be rejected honestly than protected by her own silence. He read that if he felt anything at all, she would stay. She would defer the scholarship. She would give up Chicago. She would take the risk of a whole different life if he would just tell her he wanted her in it. And at the bottom under her name, she'd written one more line smaller, like an afterthought she couldn't help adding. "I've been brave exactly once in my life, and it was writing this. Please don't let it be for nothing." Daniel finished reading. He didn't move for a long moment, and then he lowered the letter, and he looked up at Claire, and his face was wet, and when he spoke, his voice was wrecked. "Please, don't let it be for nothing." He read aloud the last line, the one that had been waiting 15 years for an answer. He looked at her. "That's what you wrote, at the bottom. Please, don't let it be for nothing." Claire's hand flew to her mouth. "I forgot I wrote that." "I'm answering it," Daniel said. 15 years late. But I'm answering it right now. He took a step toward her. "It wasn't for nothing, Claire. Do you hear me? It took 15 years, and it went through hell to get here, but it reached me. I read it. Every word. And it wasn't for nothing. You were brave once, and it counted, and I'm standing here because of it. Your bravery didn't die in a box. It just took the long way home." Claire broke completely then, and Daniel closed the distance and held her the letter still in one hand, pressed against her back, and she cried into his chest. 15 years of grief and relief all at once, and he held her through every bit of it. Behind them, Mara turned away and put her face in her hands and cried her own tears that no one comforted, because that was hers to carry now alone. The way she'd made her sister carry things alone for 15 years. When Claire could speak again, she pulled back and looked up at him. "What do we do now?" "Now," Daniel said, "you and I go somewhere that isn't a parking lot and we talk. Really talk. About everything. About Emma. About Chicago. About how two people who live 300 miles apart with completely separate lives even begin to figure out whether there's something real here, or whether tonight was just grief and adrenaline and a 15-year-old ghost. We don't decide anything tonight. We don't promise anything we can't keep. But we start. Tomorrow we start. And we find out." "And Mara," Claire's voice dropped. She glanced back at her sister still standing there, still weeping quietly. "What do I do about Mara?" Daniel followed her gaze. "That one's not mine to answer," he said gently. "That's the hardest one, and it's yours alone. But Claire, you don't have to answer it tonight either. You don't have to decide right now whether you can ever forgive her. You're allowed to not know. You're allowed to love her and be devastated by her at the same time for as long as you need to. Just don't let her decide it for you. That's the one thing. Don't let her manage this the way she's managed everything. Whatever you decide about your sister, make sure it's you deciding it, not her. Not out of guilt, not out of obligation. You." Claire nodded slowly, and then she walked over to her sister. Mara looked up terrified, hoping and not daring to hope. "I'm not going to tell you it's okay," Claire said, "because it isn't. It might never be. I want you to go home tonight, and I don't want you to call me tomorrow or the day after. I need time. I need a lot of time, maybe months, maybe more. I don't know yet how much of you I can have in my life after this, and I'm not going to lie to you and pretend I do." She took a breath. "But you brought it back. You could have let me believe it burned, and you didn't. So I'm not going to tell you we're done forever either. I'm just going to tell you the truth, which is that I don't know. And for the first time in our entire lives, you're going to have to sit in not knowing and wait, and let me be the one who decides how this goes. Can you do that?" Mara nodded, tears streaming. "Yes, whatever you need. However long, yes." "Then go home, Mara," Claire said, not unkindly. "Go home and let me have my life, starting tonight. Let me have it." And Mara Whitmore, who had spent 15 years refusing to let go, finally let go. She nodded once more, and she turned, and she walked back to her car, and she drove away into the dark alone, carrying the weight she would carry now for the rest of her days. And this time, nobody stopped her, and nobody comforted her. And the story she'd tried so hard to control drove off with her taillights and left the two people it truly belonged to standing together in the dark. Claire watched the taillights disappear. Then she turned back to Daniel. "Okay," she said, wiping her face, and there was something new in her voice now, something lighter, something that hadn't been there in 15 years. "Okay, it's just us. It's just us. So..." She almost laughed. "Coffee. There's a diner off the highway that used to be open all night. Is it weird to want pancakes right now? I feel like I've lived a whole lifetime tonight, and my body's telling me it wants pancakes." Daniel laughed, a real laugh, the first fully free laugh he'd laughed in longer than he could remember. "Pancakes sound perfect." And they went and got pancakes. They sat in a booth in an all-night diner until the sky started going gray at the edges, and they talked. They talked about everything. Daniel told her the rest about Emma, the good and the hard. Claire told him about Chicago, the career she was proud of, and the loneliness underneath it. They talked about their parents and their regrets, and the strange fact of finding each other again at exactly the age their own parents had been when everything went wrong. They didn't make any promises they couldn't keep. Daniel didn't say he loved her because it was too soon, and he was too honest to say it before it was true. Claire didn't ask him to move or promise to move herself. They were adults now with real lives and a real child and real distance between them, and they treated all of it with the seriousness it deserved. But before they left the diner, as the sun was coming up, Claire reached across the table and put her hand over his. "I'm scared this won't work," she said. "I want to be honest. 300 miles, your daughter, my job. 15 years of being different people. I'm scared we're going to try and it's going to be too hard, and we're going to lose each other all over again, except this time it'll be our own fault instead of Mara's." "Maybe," Daniel said. "That's a real possibility. I'm not going to promise you it won't happen." "That's not very reassuring." "I know." He turned his hand over and laced his fingers through hers. "But here's what I can promise. If it doesn't work, it's not going to be because either of us was too scared to try. That's the one thing I can guarantee you. We already lost 15 years to silence and cowardice and things left unsaid. Whatever happens from here, it's not going to be that. If we lose each other again, it'll be because we tried with everything we had, and it still didn't work, and I can live with that. What I can't live with, what I will not live with, is losing you again to fear. I did that once without even knowing I was doing it. I'm not doing it on purpose." Claire looked at him for a long moment. "Okay," she said quietly. "Then we try. Out loud. Where everybody can hear us. No more silence." "No more silence," Daniel agreed. And they meant it. The trying was not easy. It never is when it's real. There were long drives on Friday nights and longer drives back on Sunday. There were phone calls that stretched past midnight, and video calls where Emma slowly, cautiously learned who this woman on the screen was, and decided in her direct 7-year-old way that she liked her. There were hard conversations about what a future could even look like, about whose life would bend and how much. There were nights Claire lay awake in Chicago, wondering if she was a fool, and nights Daniel sat in his quiet Columbus apartment, wondering the same thing. There was Mara and the slow, halting, incomplete work of what Claire would eventually decide to do about her sister, which took far longer than a night and was never fully finished, and was in the end Claire's own to decide exactly as it should have been. But they tried, out loud, every day, and it worked. Not the way a fairy tale works. It worked the way real things work, slowly, with effort, with setbacks, with two grown people choosing each other again and again on the ordinary days when it would have been easier not to. A year after the reunion, Claire took a job with a firm that had an office in Columbus, and she moved not for Daniel, she was careful to say, but for herself, for a life she wanted to build in which Daniel and Emma happened to be the center. 2 years after that, Emma stood up at their small wedding in a dinosaur dress she'd insisted on, and announced to the assembled guests that pterodactyls were not technically dinosaurs, and everyone laughed, and Daniel looked across the room at the woman he'd loved since he was 18, and finally at long last had. The letter hangs framed in their hallway now. Not hidden. Not in a box, where anyone can see it. 2 pages in an 18-year-old's careful hand, with the ink run slightly in the places where tears fell on it long ago, and at the bottom, the line that waited 15 years for its answer. Please don't let it be for nothing. It wasn't for nothing. It was never for nothing. It took the long way through silence and lies and fire and flood and 15 stolen years. But it arrived exactly where it was always meant to arrive, in the hands of the man it was written for, and it did the one thing she'd asked it to do. Because a letter can be stolen, but the truth in it cannot be destroyed. A love can be buried, but it does not die just because someone decided it should. And silence can steal years from a person, whole decades, entire lives, if they let it. But the moment 2 people decide to stop being silent, the moment they choose to speak the true thing out loud, no matter how much it costs, no matter how late it comes, that is the moment silence loses, and the truth at long last comes home. Daniel Carter is not invisible anymore. Claire Whitmore is not alone anymore. And the girl on the landing watching the boy on the 3rd step finally got her answer. She was heard.